Welcome. Welcome to this sacred space. And welcome to this most sacred time in the Jewish year. You know, I smile because though it's not my first year going through the high holidays, my 45th, I'm just feeling so grateful that we have a tradition that gifts us this time of the year to be with ourselves. It's a tremendous gift that for a few days, in this case a couple weeks, we get to kind of step back, from the outward focused lives that we lead. And for a time, we get to go inward. We get to look inside. We get to be a little bit introspective. To look at the year that was and measure that against what we hold dear, the standards we hold for ourselves, for our lives. And to ask ourselves powerful yet simple questions. How did I do this past year? How is my life going? Are my decisions and my path aligned with my deepest values, my sense of purpose? And if not, where are the places where I can change a little bit, expand perhaps? Where are the places that I can find healing? What are the people that I need to connect to and perhaps make amends for some of the hurt that I have caused? What are the people in my life that it's now time for me to forgive? Because my lack of forgiveness perhaps is holding me back, keeping me stuck. So we have this powerful 2 weeks, actually between now and the end of Yom Kippur, we have exactly 18 days. And it's no mistake, I don't think, that the number 18 is part of those holy days. 18, Chai in Hebrew, is a symbol of life. And perhaps what we are seeking to receive is renewed life for ourselves. So tonight we are together as a community going to cross a threshold and enter into these energies of the high holy days. So I'd like to use this time we have, the time that the high holy days provide us with to explore perhaps together what seems to be overwhelming our lives in these days. What seems to permeate our culture, our nation. What we witnessed again this week, that leaves us at the end of yet another week with a sense of heaviness in our heart, a deep sadness in our throat, and a bitter taste in our mouth. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this relentless sense of anxiety that we feel, all of us, young and old, children and grandparents. And how do we live with that anxiety, that sense of insecurity that is now part of all of our lives? How do we be with that? And perhaps, just perhaps, how can we transcend that? What are the tenets of Jewish spirituality have to help us, give us, in order for us to move through this sense of anxiety and insecurity? I mean, if we look at what we want as individuals in life, we want a sense of purpose. We want to lead purposeful lives within the context of a world that we hope would make sense. And we inform our decisions, we inform our behavior based on this belief, this deep, core, rooted belief that we are all working towards a better future. But if we look at the last few years, maybe a decade or so, we come to realize that there are fewer and fewer solid rocks we can hold on to. You know, those rocks of things we knew were true, things we knew were right. All of these seems to be receding in a past and no longer be relevant. We feel that we are stepping on ground that is no longer solid. Our sense of trust toward the future has been eroding. Those myths, those rocks that were the foundation of our society, of our culture. The myth, for example, of our political system. We used to think it was for the people, by the people. The myth of our social system, that was to be this sphere of a compassionate melting pot. This myth of a principled economy, where ethics and equality would rule. That our leaders, be they in political ranks or captains of industry, would have our best at heart, the best of our planet and its ecology at heart. All this myth that we held on to, that were the foundation of our belief in a better future, have been shattered, have collapsed and died. And what we are left with is an age of great frustration, anxiety, anger, agitation. So what are we to do when we are met with that kind of feeling, that kind of anxiety and sense of insecurity in the face of the world that seems to be running too fast towards a future that we fear is the edge of a cliff from which there is no return? What are we to do? To be in a place that is this way. And it seems to me that there may be two paths that we can look toward. And the first of them, and I've given this, believe me, a lot of thoughts over the last couple of years, was perhaps to create a different myth, a new myth that would unite all of us and carve a new path forward. I've been thinking about it because I've been thinking about it in the context of the Jewish people. You know, at the beginning of the century, we had this creation of the state of Israel that was a unifying story, a unifying narrative for all of us. And then, once the state of Israel was created, there was this need for the Jewish people to rally in order to free the refusnik, the Jews from the Red Russia, from the Soviet Union. And that kind of helped us be together, coalesce around this ideal. And that also no longer exists. And we have been having, as a Jewish people, a hard time regrouping. And we have found ourselves divided. And I suppose that's the issue with all the myth that we create one after the other, is that ultimately they fail. Ultimately they outlive their time. And they throw us right back into a place of anxiety and insecurity. Because we get to a place where we feel that we need to defend them, to fight for them, even though they are declining and disappearing. So I kind of moved away from that. Resuscitating an old myth or creating a new one is not going to help us. And I'm leaning towards the second alternative, and you might not like it. And that's okay, you know. The reason why we're here is either to support the afflicted or to afflict the well-to-do. The alternative that I'm thinking about is that instead of trying to hold on to those boulders and swim against the current of life, to hold on to those mythical rocks and boulders against all odds, fighting what maybe the universe is helping us discover, is to, in fact, release our grasp onto this myth. To let go of the boulders, of the rocks, to let go of our holding points, and to let ourselves flow with the river. Not work against the river and resist the river, but flow with the river of life. And that's a scary, challenging, uncomfortable proposition. But I would suggest that perhaps freeing ourselves from the tyranny of our anxiety and our inadequacy in trying to hold on. We need to let go and to embrace and accept both anxiety and insecurity. And this is the spiritual paradox. There's always a spiritual paradox that calls us to do what the rational mind cannot fathom or understand or go with. Because the mind will resist what I'm trying to say. But what if to be free of that anxiety, of that sense of inadequacy, of that sense of lack of control, we had in fact to understand that our very holding on, that need for our life to be secure and to be devoid of anxiety, is the illusion that keeps us caught in that anxiety and that sense of insecurity. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Do you hear the paradox there? That our very holding to our wanting security, our trying to feel secure, is the result of our feeling insecure. So that's what I want to explore, to start exploring tonight, right now, through this night of Slichot. That's what I want us to look into over the next 18 days, to wrestle with that sense of anxiety that is present in all of our lives. And I will help you meet that on Rosh Hashanah as well. Actually, I have figured out the meaning of the Akedah of Isaac. Finally, after hundreds and hundreds of years, I have found the answer to the sacrifice of Isaac. You're welcome. I have finally realized that because of his anxiety and lack of certainty and insecurity, because of those plagues that Abraham lived with, he in fact went so far as wanting to sacrifice his son. So now you really have to come Rosh Hashanah morning to find out what happened. And then we'll use the day of Yom Kippur, with this practice that Yom Kippur is a rehearsal for dying, to really let go of our need to control the river, to really let go of our need to control the river, its current, and to stop building a dam of the rocks, the boulders of those mythical stories we try to hold on to, and to really die into the river and see where the river is guiding us, because that may be more exciting, definitely less anxiety driven. So here we go.